Deep in the heart of Mexico's Selva Maya, where the jungle hums with life and secrets, a story unfolded that'd make your heart race and your eyes widen. Elena Rivera wasn't just any kid growing up in this lush, untamed wilderness. She was the daughter of Daniel Rivera, a conservationist who poured his soul into protecting the wildlife that called this place home. From the moment she could toddle, Elena was out there, barefoot and fearless, surrounded by the sights and sounds of the jungle. But it wasn't the vibrant parrots or the whispering trees that stole her heart. It was two jaguar cubs, Shadow and Blaze, whose golden eyes seemed to hold a spark of something extraordinary. These weren't just animals. They were her companions, her confidants, in a world where trust was as rare as it was precious. As she grew, Elena's bond with them deepened, forging a connection that felt almost otherworldly. But life in the wild isn't a fairy tale, and the jungle doesn't play by human rules. Years later, Elena, now a woman with fire in her veins, ignored every warning, every voice that told her it was reckless, dangerous, impossible to track down those same jaguars she'd raised. What happened next? Well, let's just say it's a tale that'll tug at your heartstrings and leave you wondering what it really means to love something wild. Elena Rivera's childhood in the Selva Maya was nothing short of magical, a whirlwind of dirt-streaked knees and laughter echoing through the jungle's emerald canopy. Raised in the heart of her father Daniel's wildlife sanctuary, she didn't just grow up around animals. She lived with them, breathed their air and learned their unspoken language. Shadow and Blaze, two jaguar cubs rescued from poachers, were her world. From the moment their tiny paws stumbled into her life, Elena was smitten. She'd spend hours sprawled on the warm earth, giggling as Blaze playfully swatted at her shoelaces, or Shadow nuzzled her cheek with a softness that belied his wild nature. Under Daniel's watchful eye, these fierce creatures were gentle giants around her, their golden eyes glinting with what felt like affection. They weren't pets, her father made that crystal clear, but protectors, playmates, almost like siblings in a world where survival was a team effort. Every morning, Elena would race to their enclosure, her small hands clutching bits of fruit or a toy she'd fashioned from vines. She'd chatter away, telling them stories of her dreams, her fears, and they'd listen, their steady gazes making her feel seen in a way no human ever could. Daniel, a man of quiet wisdom, saw the bond growing deeper than he'd expected. One humid afternoon, he knelt beside her, pressing a silver pendant shaped like a jaguar into her palm. "This is your promise," he said, voice low but firm, "to respect their wildness always." Elena clutched it, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose she couldn't yet name. The pendant became her talisman, a reminder of the love she felt for Shadow and Blaze, and the responsibility that came with it. Life in the sanctuary wasn't all sunshine and cuddles, though. Daniel's work was grueling, balancing the needs of the animals with the harsh realities of conservation. Elena learned early that love for wildlife meant sacrifice, long hours, tough choices, and sometimes letting go. She'd watch her father mend wounds or track threats, his hands steady but his brow heavy with worry. Shadow and Blaze, too, were growing fast, their playful pounces turning powerful, their roars deepening. Yet with Elena, they remained tender, as if they sensed her heart was tied to theirs. She'd lie awake at night, the pendant cool against her skin, wondering how something so wild could feel so close. The jungle taught her resilience, but it was the jaguars who taught her trust. As the years passed, Elena's bond with them only grew, woven into the fabric of her soul. She'd run alongside them during supervised play, her laughter mingling with their low chuffs. The sanctuary staff marveled at it, whispering about the girl who spoke to jaguars like they were family. But the jungle doesn't stand still, and neither do the lives of those who live in it. Elena was growing up, and Shadow and Blaze were too. The days of carefree romps were numbered, and a shadow loomed on the horizon, one that would test the strength of the bond they'd built. What would happen when the wild called them back? Elena Rivera's world at 11 years old was a kaleidoscope of jungle greens and the warm, musky scent of Shadow and Blaze, her Jaguar companions. But the Selva Maya, for all its beauty, was no place for illusions. And the day came when the truth hit her like a sudden downpour. Shadow and Blaze, now sleek and powerful, their spotted coats gleaming under the dappled sunlight, were ready to return to the wild. It was the heart of her father, Daniel's mission. Rescue, rehabilitate, release. Elena had heard those words 1,000 times, but they'd never felt so heavy. She stood by the enclosure, her silver Jaguar pendant clutched so tightly it left marks on her palm, as Daniel explained why this had to happen. "They're not ours to keep," he said, his voice steady but laced with the same ache she felt. "Their story belongs to the jungle." She nodded, but inside her heart was breaking into a million pieces. The process wasn't abrupt. Daniel made sure of that. For months, the Jaguars had been gradually weaned from human contact. Their enclosure expanded to mimic the wild. Elena watched as Shadow's playful pounces turned into calculated stalks, as Blaze's curious nudges grew rarer. She'd sit by the fence, whispering to them, half hoping her voice could tether them to her forever. But she wasn't a little girl anymore, not really. She'd seen enough of her father's work to know that keeping them caged would betray everything the sanctuary stood for. Wildlife wasn't here for her comfort. It had its own rules, its own rhythm. Still, knowing didn't make it easier. The day of the release was a blur of humid air and quiet tension. Elena helped load supplies, her hands moving mechanically as the team prepared to transport Shadow and Blaze to a remote part of the reserve. She caught glimpses of their amber eyes through the crate slats, searching for a spark of recognition, but they seemed distant, already half wild. At the release site, deep in the jungle where vines twisted like secrets, Daniel knelt beside her. "This is what love looks like sometimes," he murmured, squeezing her shoulder. "Letting go." When the crates opened, Shadow bounded out first, his powerful legs carrying him into the undergrowth without a backward glance. Blaze hesitated, his gaze locking with Elena's for a heartbeat that felt like forever. Then he, too, vanished into the green. Elena stood there, the jungle's chorus swallowing her silent sobs. The pendant felt heavier now, a reminder of a bond that had shaped her, and a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Back at the sanctuary, the days dragged on, empty without the familiar rumble of Jaguar chuffs. She threw herself into helping with other animals, but her thoughts always wandered to the jungle, wondering if Shadow and Blaze were safe, if they remembered her at all. Years would pass, but the ache never fully faded. It simmered, waiting for the day she'd decide to chase it, to find out if the wild could still hold a piece of her heart. At 23, Elena Rivera was no longer the wide-eyed girl who'd romped with Jaguar cubs in the Selva Maya. She was a woman forged by the jungle's lessons, her father's legacy burning bright in her chest. But the pull of Shadow and Blaze, those Jaguars she'd raised and released, never loosened its grip. It was a restless itch, a whisper in her dreams that grew louder until she couldn't ignore it anymore. Against every warning, colleagues muttering about reckless dreams, locals shaking their heads at the dangers, she organized an expedition to find them. The jungle didn't give up its secrets easily, and tracking 2 fully wild Jaguars was a gamble that could end in heartbreak or worse. But Elena, clutching her silver Jaguar pendant, felt the call too deeply to turn back. This wasn't just about her. It was about proving that bonds with wildlife could endure, that her father's work wasn't just a fleeting rescue but a lasting story of connection. The expedition was no small feat. Elena assembled a tight-knit team, biologists, trackers, and a cinematographer to capture the journey. They loaded up with gear, GPS trackers, camera traps, and enough supplies to survive the jungle's unpredictable moods. The Selva Maya stretched out like a living maze, its dense canopy swallowing sunlight and sound. Days blurred into treks through tangled vines and muddy rivers, the air thick with humidity and the buzz of insects. Elena's heart raced with every snapped twig, every shadow that might be more than a trick of the light. The team followed faint paw prints and scat, piecing together clues like detectives in a world that didn't welcome intruders. At night, Around flickering campfires, Elena would trace the pendant's edges, her mind replaying memories of Blaze's playful nudges and Shadow's steady gaze. What if they'd forgotten her? What if the wild had claimed every trace of their bond? The tension built as the days wore on. One tracker, a grizzled man named Mateo, warned her daily about the risks. Jaguars weren't house cats, and a decade in the wild changed everything. Elena nodded, but her resolve didn't waver. She felt it in her bones. They were close. Then, on a misty morning, the team spotted fresh tracks near a riverbank, larger than any they'd seen. Elena's pulse thundered as they followed the trail, the jungle holding its breath. When they reached a clearing, there he was, Blaze, his spotted coat glinting like burnished gold, his eyes locking onto hers. Time stopped. Elena froze, her breath shallow, every warning screaming in her head. Would he see her as a stranger? A threat? Then, slowly, Blaze stepped forward, his massive head lowering. He rubbed against her, a low chuff rumbling from his chest, like a memory come to life. Tears stung Elena's eyes as she reached out, her fingers trembling just inches from his fur. The moment was fragile, electric, a bridge between past and present. But Shadow was still out there, and the jungle wasn't done testing her heart. Elena Rivera stood in the heart of the Selva Maya, her hand still tingling from Blaze's fleeting touch, the jungle's pulse thrumming through her veins. Finding him, seeing that spark of recognition in his eyes, was more than a reunion. It was a vindication of everything her father, Daniel, had built. Shadow remained elusive, a shadow indeed, but Blaze's thriving presence in the wild was proof enough. The jaguars she'd loved as a child were where they belonged, free and fierce. The expedition's footage, raw and breathtaking, captured Blaze's powerful frame weaving through the undergrowth, a symbol of wildlife flourishing against the odds. Elena's heart swelled with a bittersweet pride. She'd honored her father's legacy, his dream of coexistence between humans and the wild. Back at the sanctuary, she poured herself into expanding its mission, training new conservationists, and sharing the story of her journey with the world. The silver pendant around her neck, now worn smooth from years of touch, felt like a beacon guiding her forward. The jungle had tested her, stripped away her doubts, and left her with a fire to protect what she loved. That single moment with Blaze, fleeting yet profound, became a rallying cry for others to care, to fight for the animals that couldn't speak for themselves. The footage spread like wildfire, inspiring countless others to see the wild not as something to conquer, but to cherish. Elena's resolve deepened. She'd keep pushing, keep telling the stories of the creatures that shaped her. But the jungle always held more mysteries, and she couldn't help wondering if Shadow was still out there, waiting. What does it mean to love something wild, to hold it close and then let it go? Elena Rivera's story isn't just about a girl and her jaguars. It's a wake-up call, a reminder that our planet's wildlife is hanging on by a thread, and every choice we make matters. From her childhood in the Selva Maya to that heart-stopping moment with Blaze, Elena showed us what it looks like to fight for something bigger than yourself. Can you imagine the courage it took to step into the jungle, ignoring every warning, chasing a bond that might have been lost forever? What would you risk for the things you love? Her journey leaves us with a challenge. How can we, in our own lives, protect the wild places and creatures that make this world so extraordinary? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your stories, your passions. If this tale of heart, hope, and conservation moved you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. There are more incredible stories like Elena's waiting for you on this channel, each one a chance to connect with the world in a deeper way. Don't miss out.